What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. All right, so before I get into this video, I want to give a shout out to the brother Marvin Johnson for the $25 super thanks in the comment section. Salute to you for showing love, man. Longtime subscriber to Too Raw for TV. So, this is a requested video. All right. So remember, I think it was earlier this week, maybe, or late last week. I did a video talking about how, in Eddie Murphy's view, he feels that Norbit was one of his funnier movies. He did it in a recent interview. He brought it up when they was asking him like what his Mount Rushmore of movies were, and then he said, "Well, it might be easier for me to name my worst movies." And then the interviewer said, "Well, some people might bring Norbit up there." And he said, "Nah, I think it's one of my funnier movies," and I agree with that. And you know what's funny is because if you went by word of mouth, everybody was saying how bad Norbit was just because people were saying it was bad. And then when I went and watched it for myself, it was hilarious. That's why I'm not with this trend of going by word of mouth, because people are lemmings. People will just regurgitate what other people say. And I've seen people say a movie sucked and they never even watched the fucking movie. But anyway, he did give his Mount Rushmore. And I gotta be honest with you, I mean, look, that's Eddie Murphy. That's his opinion about what his Mount Rushmore is, right? I mean, that's the movies that he did personally. But Eddie could be looking at it differently. Eddie could be looking at the quality of the script. He could be looking at his artistic freedom in contributing to the movie, him getting along with co-workers. He could be looking at things a little bit differently from us. But anyway, and the claim and the appreciation that people show for his work. His Mount Rushmore, I believe, was, and at first he said 48 hours, and then he changed his mind and put Dreamgirls. And then I think the other film, oh man, I think Coming to America was second, or one of the four. And then I think the other one, oh boy, I think it was Shrek was third, and then fourth was Nutty Professor, I think. I think that's what it was. So I think it was Coming to America, Shrek, Nutty Professor, and Dreamgirls. I think those are his top four. Now, me personally, it's a difficult pick for me, right? But if I had to go by my favorite four or top four Eddie Murphy films, then I would have to go with 48 Hours. Man, 48 Hours, Coming to America, Trading Places, and man, it's tough afterwards because I could go with the popular picks or I'm gonna go with what I really like. So I'm gonna have to go with the fourth movie being Harlem Nights, man. I know that some people might say Boomerang, that some people might put another Professor there, but to me, those are my four favorites. Like, um, yeah, I have to go with 48 Hours, Coming to America, Trading Places, and Harlem Nights. Now, if I had some reasonable, if I had to have some, excuse me, some honorable mentions, if I could just pick two honorable mentions, they would be added to those movies. I would add Beverly Hills Cop and The Golden Child. And that's it for me. You know what I'm saying? Now I know some people will be like, they'll probably take out Harlem Nights and put Beverly Hills Cop there. I have no problem with you doing that. But to me, to have three generations of comedians, you know what I'm saying? Red Red Fox, you big dummy. Richard Pryor. Oh, God, Jesus, God. And Eddie Murphy, all in one movie. And I think it's just an underrated film. If you look at the sheer talent in that movie, Red Fox, Eddie Murphy, Richard Pryor, Della Reese. Um, People forget that his brother Charlie was in the movie. Arsenio Hall was in the movie. Um, Michael Lerner, Bugsy Calhoun was in the movie. Danny Aiello was in the movie. Um, Robin Harris, before he blew up, was in the movie. Robin Harris should be one of the greats, man. It wasn't for his tragic death. Uh, his uncle Ray Murphy was in the movie. Uh, Leela Rashawn, man, it was a star-studded cast, man. But yeah, that's pretty much how I look at that, man. Now, if you're talking about what other movies did he do that I like, um, Beverly Hills 2, Beverly Hills 3 wasn't as bad as people make it out to be, but it wasn't as good as the other Beverly Hills movies. I think Beverly Hills Cop Axel F or Axel Foley, the last one, which thankfully they were able to get the guy that played Taggart before he passed away last year. I'm glad they were able to get him into that role. That was a good, redemption of that series. Nutty Professor was great. The Clumps movie wasn't as good as the first Nutty Professor, but it was good. Norbit, that's like I say all the time. I think Norbit was one of his better movies. Uh, I didn't think Daddy Daycare was that bad, to be honest with you. I like Daddy Daycare. Um, Boomerang was great. I thought The Distinguished Gentleman was better than what people make it out to be. I loved Vampire in Brooklyn. Um, I'm gonna tell you another movie I thought was underrated that he did was Metro. Um, I thought Metro was funny, but it was not Beverly Hills Cop. It wasn't that. It had a more serious overtone to it. But Eddie Murphy still was able to put a little bit of comedy in it. But it was a really good movie with him and Michael Rappaport. Even though Michael Rappaport been pissing me off lately. And what's the other guy, man? Michael Wincott. I think his name is Michael Wincott. I think it is. He is an actor that was very prominent in the '90s. Generally played villains very well. You might remember him as in that movie, The Crow. But anyway, man, yeah, Eddie Murphy was box office gold in the '80s. And also going back to the movies I said that I like, Trading Places was a good one. It basically was a theatrical length movie based upon many different, because you kind of saw theories about that. If you look at some old Three Stooges sketches, right, or shorts, I think it was one called Hoi Polloi, right, where you had these professors, and they made a bet on if they could take some, lame-brained, blue-collar schmucks and make them into gentlemen. Make them into, that wasn't a racial angle with that, but still, they made a bet that one of them felt like, it wasn't you can take anybody and make them into a civilized, sophisticated gentleman. It's more of a nurture thing. And the other one thinks, no, it was more nature and genetics and all of that. So Trading Places is basically a more sinister version of that, where one of the Duke brothers, I think it was Ralph Bellamy's character, felt like you could take anybody, including the black man from the ghetto, and mold him into being a sophisticated man about town. And the more racist brother, even though both of them were racist, but that's the thing. If you pay attention to the movie, Ralph Bellamy was more of a liberal, but he still was a racist. Don Amici was more of the traditional conservative, hardcore conservative. Ralph Bellamy was a little bit more soft-hearted, but they were both racist if you pay attention to it. And that's one of the reasons why, even when I watched that movie, I've always resisted the notion that liberals are always our friend. That's not always the case. But Ralph Bellamy proved to be correct, because once you put Eddie Murphy's character in that environment, he did change for the better. You put Dan Aykroyd's character in the slums, and he did ultimately, because of his environment, he was pushed into crime. And honestly, that's one of the movies I love, because I've always felt like that. I've always felt like, for people who are racist and said it's in our genetics to be violent, and I'm like, no, it's not in our genetics to be violent. It's in our culture. And that's not a good thing at all. It's not. But if you grow up in an environment where you're surrounded by violence and gunshots and it becomes your norm, this functionality, you're gonna be edgy, you're gonna be angry, you're gonna be, your personality is gonna reflect that. Whereas if you grow up listening to Mozart music and you're coddled and engage in intellectual conversations with very little hint of violence as far as threats, you're going to be calmer. You're going to be more soft-spoken, and you don't have to be loud and boisterous to have people hear you when you're in a household of, multiple people. And there's just certain things culturally that I've always felt like people don't quite understand about when you grow up in the ghetto, you know. But anyway, got a little bit off point there. Tell me what you guys think.